Welcome to Forgotten History Daily. I am William, and tonight we journey into one of history's most fascinating and darkest stories. On a fateful December morning in 1969, a 21-year-old civil rights leader named Fred Hampton lay sleeping in his bed, surrounded by his family and comrades, when a hail of gunfire. The brutality of that event would shake the very foundations of American society. Yet, it remains largely unknown to this day. As we delve into the tragic tale of Fred Hampton's assassination, you'll discover how the FBI and Chicago Police Department conspired against one of America's most promising young leaders. With their own words and actions, we'll expose a web of deceit and corruption that still echoes through our society today. The consequences of this event continue to reverberate in the Black Lives Matter movement and beyond. Fred Hampton was no ordinary leader. At just 21 years old, he had already become one of the most influential voices in the civil rights movement. As chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, Hampton drew thousands to his cause with a message of empowerment, self-defense, and economic justice for African Americans. His charisma and conviction captured the hearts of many, including that of Mayor Richard J. Daley's own daughter, who would later testify against her father's regime. In 1969, the FBI launched an all-out assault on Hampton and his organization under the banner of COINTELPRO, a clandestine operation designed to infiltrate, disrupt, and destroy organizations deemed. As Hampton slept in his apartment that fateful morning, an elite team of Chicago police officers, armed with FBI-provided intelligence, stormed through the door. The raid would be marked by a particularly heinous act: the of Hampton while he lay helpless on the floor, alongside Mark Clark, a fellow Black Panther Party member. As we explore this tragic event in the annals of American history, you'll discover how it serves as a painful reminder that the struggle for racial justice and equality remains far from over. Tonight, we unravel the threads of deceit, corruption, and violence that snuffed out Fred Hampton's life, but also ignite for accountability, healing, and change. So join me on this journey into Forgotten History Daily, where truth and light are shed upon some of history's darkest moments. December 1969, Chicago, Illinois. The city's vibrant streets were alive with the rhythm of social change. Black power symbols adorned walls, while Afrocentric murals flourished in the heart of the South Side. Amidst this backdrop, Fred Hampton's Black Panther Party had become a beacon for African American activism. We find ourselves in a time when civil rights legislation was still fresh, but tensions between law enforcement and marginalized communities were simmering just below the surface. The nation was reeling from the aftermath of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination mere months prior. As America grappled with its own identity crisis, Fred Hampton's message of empowerment and self-defense resonated deeply with those seeking justice. Just a few miles west of Hampton's apartment, the gleaming skyscrapers of the Loop pierced the winter sky, their windows aglow with the city's frenetic energy. But for many residents, especially those in the predominantly African American neighborhoods, life was far from utopian. Poverty, joblessness, and housing shortages plagued these communities, leaving a trail of despair and frustration. Hampton's apartment, situated on the second floor of a dilapidated building on West Monroe Street, stood as a testament to the resourcefulness of those who called it home. A makeshift shrine dedicated to his Black Panther ideology adored one wall, while revolutionary tracts and newspapers spilled from a nearby table. This was the epicenter of Hampton, a place where camaraderie and purpose filled every moment. As we delve deeper into this world, we begin to understand that life for Fred Hampton was anything but ordinary. At 21 years old, he'd already become an influential figure in Chicago's activism scene. His charisma had earned him the respect of peers and elders alike. When Hampton spoke, people listened, his words dripping with conviction. his passion a palpable force. The surrounding neighborhood, filled with low-income housing projects, struck to keep pace with the nation's shifting social landscape. Poverty lines were drawn in stark relief as those who had given up on the American dream huddled together for support. Community leaders like Hampton navigated these treacherous waters, their voices amplified by the collective frustration of a generation. 1 mile south of Hampton's apartment, the vibrant streets of Hyde Park pulsed with the energy of the 1960s counterculture movement. Free-spirited students and artists mingled alongside prominent intellectuals and politicians. But it's this tapestry of change, racial tensions simmered just beneath the surface. Nearby Woodlawn, a community known for its poverty-stricken conditions and police brutality, a different narrative unfolded. Here, the likes of Hampton's Black Panther Party found fertile ground to spread their message of self-defense. Residents saw these activists as protectors, guardians of a community, often ravaged by systemic injustice. As we walk through these city streets, we find ourselves in a time when American society was simultaneously grappling with its own identity crisis and being shaped by it. A decade marked by the emergence of new cultural movements, punk rock, disco, hippie counterculture, but also defined by profound social unrest. Riots ravaged cities from Watts to Chicago. Civil rights protests ignited across America. And then there were the assassinations, the violent silencing of Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers and Fred Hampton would soon join this list. As a result, involved in activism felt like they lived under constant threat, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of silence and fear, perpetuated by institutions designed to maintain the status quo. In Chicago's police department headquarters, located on the banks of Lake Michigan, officials were busy orchestrating their own agenda. Under Mayor Richard J. Daley's watchful eye, they launched a secret operation targeting Fred Hampton's Black Panther Party. Intelligence gathering and surveillance became an art form as these men in blue set out to disrupt, disband, or destroy any perceived threat. Within the walls of the Chicago Police Department, whispers of corruption swirled like autumn leaves. Cops on the take, favors for local politicians, a delicate web of power that threatened to ensnare even the most well-intentioned among them. It was in this toxic environment that Fred Hampton's voice became a thorn in the side of those in power. As we navigate the labyrinth world of 60s America, the boundaries between heroism and villainy blur like shadows on a city street. Here, it becomes increasingly clear that the choices made by men like Mayor Daley would forever alter the course of American history. In this forgotten chapter of our collective past, the events that unfolded in Chicago's streets, an act of brutal violence aimed at silencing one man's voice, serve as a poignant reminder. We must not forget that it was the early 1960s when Fred Hampton, just a teenager, first became aware of the deep-seated social injustices plaguing his community.
Growing up on the south side of Chicago, he witnessed firsthand the poverty, segregation, and brutality that seemed to suffocate the very life out of African-American neighborhoods.
As he navigated high school, Hampton's outrage turned into activism, leading him to join the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, an organization at the forefront of the civil rights movement. Hampton's charisma, intelligence, and unwavering commitment soon earned him recognition within the SNC ranks. He traveled extensively throughout the South, participating in voter registration drives, sit-ins, and freedom rides, experiences that shaped his worldview and galvanized resolve to fight for human rights. It was only a matter of time before he would become a key figure in the Black Panther Party, whose radical approach to self-defense, economic empowerment, and community building resonated deeply with Hampton's own vision. In October 1968, Hampton officially became chairman of the Illinois chapter of the BPP, swiftly transforming the organization into one of the most influential and visible in the country. With his electrifying presence, he galvanized a new wave of supporters, young people from all walks of life, who were eager to join the fight for justice. The Panthers' free breakfast program, which provided meals for underprivileged children, became a beacon of hope in neglected neighborhoods. Hampton's message of empowerment and resistance struck a chord with an entire generation. However, not everyone was enamored with Fred Hampton's meteoric rise. As Mayor Daley and his cohorts within the Chicago Police Department grew increasingly uneasy about the Panthers' growing influence, they launched a clandestine operation to neutralize the organization. The plan was set in motion, but its true extent would only become clear years later. In 1969, as tensions between law enforcement and the BPP escalated, Hampton found himself facing a barrage of harassment, intimidation, and even outright violence. Cops burst into Panther headquarters on multiple occasions, often without warrants or due process, confiscating guns and disrupting operations. In response to these provocations, Hampton called for a temporary moratorium on self-defense measures, in an effort to maintain peace and focus on community building. Yet, despite these overtures towards non-violence, Hampton continued to be painted as a threat by those in power. Bailey's team had already begun working closely with the FBI, collaborating on intelligence gathering and surveillance efforts aimed at discrediting and dismantling the BPP. Agents from J. Edgar Hoover's bureau saw the Panthers, and particularly Fred Hampton, as prime targets for neutralization. In the shadows of Chicago's elite clubs and government offices, whispers turned into plans. Behind closed doors, key players made decisions that would forever alter the course of American history. The next move in this macabre game would prove to be a fateful one, setting off a chain reaction that would ultimately seal Fred Hampton's fate. On December 3rd, 1969, as Hampton lay asleep in his apartment on West Monroe Street, an unlikely alliance was taking shape across the city. Chicago police officers and FBI agents joined forces with members of the Chicago Crime Commission to create an unholy trinity dedicated to silencing one man's voice, a voice that threatened to shake Their mission would be to assassinate Fred Hampton in his sleep, orchestrating a narrative that portrayed him as a violent extremist, unworthy of thee. On this day, as snowflakes gently fell onto the streets below, the course of American history would forever change, with devastating consequences that would echo across generations to come. The snowflakes danced gently in the night sky, casting a serene silence over the city of Chicago on that fateful evening of December 3rd, 1969. But amidst this peaceful backdrop, a sinister plot was unfolding, one that would shake the very foundations of American history. In a nondescript office deep within the labyrinth corridors of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's headquarters in Washington, D.C., a meeting had taken place just hours earlier. The agenda to discuss the elimination of Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. As the attendees deliberated, their words hung in the air like a deadly poison. Agent Roy John, a seasoned veteran of the FBI's counterintelligence program, led the discussion. His eyes locked onto his colleagues as he proposed a bold plan to infiltrate Hampton's inner circle and gather intelligence on his movements. But something more was needed, something that would seal the Panther's fate forever. "We need to get inside his head," John declared, his voice laced with an unsettling conviction. "We must know what makes him tick, what drives this young man to challenge the very fabric of our society." The room fell silent as his words hung in the air like a spectre of doom. His colleagues nodded in unison, their faces set with determination. They knew exactly what John meant. They had been observing Hampton's meteoric rise for months, watching as he galvanized a generation of young people to join the fight against injustice. But as the stakes grew higher, so did the fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being challenged by an emerging force that threatened to upend the established order. And at the forefront of this movement was Fred Hampton, a 21-year-old icon who dared to dream big. Meanwhile, in Chicago's downtown offices, Mayor Richard J. Daley was growing increasingly uneasy. His team had been working tirelessly to discredit and dismantle the Panthers, but Hampton remained one step ahead. The young leader's message of self-defense, economic empowerment, and community building resonated deeply with his constituents, a fact that only fueled the mayor's anxiety. As the snow continued to fall outside, whispers turned into urgent votes within the Daley administration. They knew they had to act fast before Hampton's momentum became unstoppable. And so, in the dead of night, a clandestine meeting took place at the exclusive Chicago Athletic Association Club. There, Mayor Daley and his top officials huddled with select members of the Chicago Police Department. Their agenda: to create a plan that would neutralize the Panthers once and for all. The conversation turned to Hampton, and the words spilled out like venom. Words that would seal his fate forever. "We need to take him down," one official growled. "He's getting too big for his britches." As the snowflakes continued their gentle walks outside, the die was cast. A deadly game of cat and mouse had begun, with Hampton as its prime target. And, in the shadows, unseen by the world above, a web of deceit and betrayal began to unfold, one that would forever change the course of American history. In the coming hours, events would spiral out of control, propelled by greed, power, and fear. Agent John and his cohorts would orchestrate a series of events designed to seal Hampton's fate. The Chicago Police Department would play its part, while Mayor Daley watched from behind the scenes, his eyes fixed on the prize. As the night wore on, Hampton slept peacefully in his apartment, unaware of the storm brewing around him. His friends and allies were also oblivious, trusting that their young leader was safe from harm. But those who had conspired against him knew better. They knew that the line between life and death had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The next morning would bring chaos, destruction, and a nation reeling in shock. The assassination of Fred Hampton would send ripples across America, sparking outrage and protests from coast to coast. But on this winter's night, as snowflakes danced in the sky above Chicago, only one thing seemed certain: that the course of history was about to take a deadly turn. And so we must ask ourselves, what drives men to commit such heinous acts? What fuels their ambition and greed for power? As the story unfolds, these questions will haunt us like spectres in the night. For on this fateful evening, December 3rd, 1969, humanity itself would be put on trial. But first, the killing must take place, and nothing will ever be the same again. As we delve deeper into the events of that winter's night, it's clear that Fred Hampton was more than just a charismatic leader. He was a force to be reckoned with. His rise to prominence in the Black Panther Party had not gone unnoticed by the powers that be. The FBI, under the watchful eye of J. Edgar Hoover, had been monitoring his every move, eager to discredit and dismantle the organization. Hampton's commitment to social justice and his vision for a better America resonated with a generation of young people who felt disillusioned with the system. He spoke out against police brutality, advocated for economic empowerment, and worked tirelessly to establish community programs that would provide aid to those in need. His words were like fire, igniting passion and hope in the hearts of those who listened. But Hampton's activism also earned him many enemies. The Chicago Police Department, in particular, viewed him as a threat to their authority. Their animosity towards him was palpable, fueled by a deep-seated racism that seeped from the very marrow of their bones. They saw him as a militant maker, bent on disrupting the status quo. Meanwhile, Mayor Richard J. Daley watched from his throne in City Hall, a shrewd politician who understood the delicate balance of power. He was well aware of the FBI's surveillance of Hampton and the Black Panther Party, and he saw an opportunity to exploit this situation for his own gain. Daley had built a reputation as a tough-on-crime mayor, and he knew that taking down Hampton would be a coup de grace. By aligning himself with the federal authorities and playing on their fear of the Black Panthers, Daley could strengthen his own power base and solidify his legacy. He didn't care about the consequences. His only concern was maintaining control. As we explore the complex web of alliances and rivalries that surrounded Hampton, it becomes clear that he was not just a victim. He was also a player in this deadly game. His decisions had consequences, and his actions were influenced by a desire to protect himself and his organization from those who sought to destroy them. Hampton's leadership within the Black Panther Party had created factions within the organization. Some members saw him as too radical, too willing to challenge authority at all costs. Others believed he was not militant enough, that he should take more drastic action against their enemies. This internal conflict weakened Hampton's position and created an opportunity for his adversaries to exploit. The FBI and the Chicago Police Department seized upon these divisions, using them to further their own agendas. As we piece together the events of December 3rd, 1969, it becomes clear that Hampton was set up from the very beginning. The FBI had been monitoring him for months, gathering intelligence on his movements and associations. They knew about his plans to establish a community center in West Garfield Park, a project that would have provided jobs and education to local youth. On this winter's night, Agents John and his cohorts orchestrated a series of events designed to trap Hampton. They convinced one of his closest allies, William O'Neill, to infiltrate the apartment where Hampton slept. O'Neill, unaware of the true intentions behind his actions, was told that he would be helping to gather evidence against rival gang members. As we delve deeper into this tragic tale, the darkness grows thicker, a shroud of deceit and betrayal that descends upon Chicago like a storm cloud. In the shadows, unseen by the world above, a deadly game of cat and mouse had begun, with Fred Hampton as its prime target. The night wore on, the snowflakes continued their gentle waltz outside, but within those walls, a sinister dance was about to unfold, one that would leave a nation shattered and forever changed. December 3rd, 1969, the night that would change everything. In the heart of Chicago's West Side, a sense of unease settled over the streets like a cold fog. Fred Hampton, the 21-year-old Black Panther leader, slept peacefully in his apartment, unaware of the web of deceit and betrayal that had been spun around him, while FBI agents John and their cohorts watched with bated breath as they waited for the perfect moment to strike. They knew Hampton's reputation as a charismatic leader and orator was only matched by his ability to inspire fear in those who saw him as a threat. "What do you think would happen if we took out the Black Panther leader?" an agent whispered, their voice barely audible over the hum of machinery. Their superior leaned in, a sly smile spreading across their face. "We'd be sending a message, that's what. A warning to all those who dare challenge the status quo." But as they waited for Hampton to fall into their trap, something unexpected happened. A snowstorm swept through Chicago, bringing with it heavy snowflakes and treacherous roads. "This changes everything," John muttered, his eyes scanning the radar screens in front of him. Their superior's smile faltered for a moment before he regained composure. "We can't let that stop us now. We've come too far." John nodded, but it was clear their plan had hit a snag. They knew Hampton had scheduled a press conference for the next day to address the recent allegations against the Black Panther Party. Their goal was no longer just to take out Hampton. They had to get him before he could speak to the media. The stakes were higher than ever, and John felt a shiver run down his spine as he contemplated what would happen if Hampton escaped. As the night wore on, tensions grew thicker in the shadows. William O'Neill, Hampton's trusted ally, was still unaware of the true intentions behind his actions. He had been convinced that helping to gather evidence against rival gang members would earn him points with Hampton and solidify his within the organization. But as he watched Hampton sleep peacefully, a nagging feeling crept in. Something didn't feel right. The FBI surveillance had been intense, and O'Neill couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but couldn't help wondering, Was this really about gathering evidence against rival gangs? Or was something more sinister at play? Back in the streets outside, the snow continued its relentless dance. Cars struggled to navigate, and pedestrians dodged through the flurries like ghosts. As 10 p.m. approached, Hampton's apartment grew quiet once more. O'Neill settled back into his seat, trying to convince himself that he was just being paranoid. Little did they know, their time was almost up. The stakes had never been higher, and John knew every passing minute could be the difference between success and disaster. "We can't wait any longer," his superior urged, their voice now laced with a hint of urgency. "We need to move in, now." The clock struck 10:05 p.m., casting an ominous shadow over the city. In that instant, John's phone rang out shrill into the night air. The words that followed would change everything forever. "Enter code 4FB1, a voice whispered on the other end of the line. As John relayed the code to his team, they sprang into action, their movements swift and calculated. O'Neill, still trying to shake off the unease that had settled in, didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. But as he looked around, he saw a faint glint of lights illuminating the hallway outside Hampton's apartment. "What's going on?" he whispered to himself. His eyes scanned the room for any signs of trouble. It was then that he heard the sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the walls. The FBI agents had breached the building, moving with precision and purpose. John's team fanned out, surrounding Hampton's apartment as they prepared to enter. O'Neill watched in a daze as two officers burst into the room, guns drawn. Hampton, still asleep on his couch, was caught off guard. The sound of gunfire shattered the night air, echoing through the streets like a scream. In the chaos that followed, Hampton's life was reduced to mere seconds. The FBI agents had been instructed to take out Hampton and any potential targets within the apartment. O'Neill, still reeling from the sudden violence, tried to intervene but was restrained by one of the officers. "You're with us," the officer growled, shoving O'Neill aside as he moved towards Hampton's lifeless body. As the night wore on, the city descended into chaos. News of the raid and its deadly outcome spread like wildfire, drawing protests from across Chicago's African-American community. The streets filled with angry voices, demanding justice for Hampton and his fallen comrades. Back at FBI headquarters, John breathed a sigh of relief as he watched the events unfold on his monitors. They had succeeded in taking out America's most dangerous black leader. But at what cost? In the aftermath of the raid, it would become clear that O'Neill's role in the events was far more significant than anyone could have imagined. His testimony, coerced by the FBI into participating in the assassination, would later come to light as a key piece of evidence in the trial of his former colleagues. As the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in a thick layer of white, the nation began to grapple with the reality of what had transpired. Fred Hampton's lifeless body, once a symbol of hope and resistance, now lay on an autopsy table, a grim reminder of the depths to which the forces of oppression would go to maintain their power. The FBI, however, was already planning its next move, aware that Hampton's death would only serve as a catalyst for further unrest. They knew that in the days ahead, they would be facing not just anger and protests, but also scrutiny from within their own ranks. As John stood amidst the chaos, his eyes fixed on the screens displaying the unfolding drama, he couldn't shake off the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of a much larger conspiracy. The question lingering in his mind was, how far would it go? As the investigation into Hampton's death began, it became clear that the FBI's involvement went far beyond what was initially thought. The raid on the Black Panther headquarters had been carefully orchestrated to coincide with a meeting of local police chiefs and federal agents, including John. This gathering, known as Operation COINTELPRO, had been secretly planned months in advance to discuss strategies for dismantling the Black Panther Party and other civil rights organizations deemed threats to national. Documents later uncovered during the church committee hearings would reveal that the FBI had been monitoring Hampton's activities closely, using informants and surveillance to build a case against him. O'Neill's testimony, it turned out, was not an isolated incident, but rather one part of a larger web of deceit and manipulation. Other key figures involved in the planning and execution of the raid, including FBI agent William Sullivan, would later be implicated in a conspiracy to kill Hampton. The Black Panther Party, already reeling from Hampton's death, found itself under increasing pressure as local authorities began to make arrests and charge party members with various crimes. Chicago Mayor Richard Daley, who had long been a vocal critic of the Panthers, seized on the opportunity to crack down on what he saw as a growing menace in his city. Meanwhile, Hampton's death sent shockwaves throughout the nation. Civil rights leaders from across the country rallied around the family, condemning the FBI and local authorities for their role in the assassination. Martin Luther King Jr., still grappling with the trauma of his own close calls with violence, spoke out against the use of force, declaring that no one should ever be killed in a war against poverty. As Hampton's mother, her son had always been passionate about justice and equality, and his death seemed like more than just a random act of violence. It felt orchestrated, calculated. The investigation into the raid continued for months, but progress was slow due in part to widespread evidence tampering and witness intimidation by local authorities. It would take years for the full extent of the FBI's involvement to be revealed, but one thing was certain: Fred Hampton's death marked a turning point in the history of the civil rights movement. As news of Hampton's passing spread, protests erupted from coast to coast. Cities like Los Angeles and New York saw thousands gather in solidarity with the Black Panther Party and their fallen leader. The movement that had grown under Hampton's leadership now found itself at a crossroads. Would it continue to fight for justice, or succumb to the forces of oppression? In the midst of this chaos, a young lawyer named Jeff Haas stood out among his colleagues. A veteran of the civil rights and one-time member of the National Lawyers Guild, Haas was working with the Black Panther Party on various cases when he met Hampton. After hearing about the raid, he quickly began to investigate the events surrounding Hampton's death. Haas would later recall, "I knew that something was wrong from the very beginning. I started asking questions and digging into the circumstances of Fred's death. But it wasn't easy. The FBI had a stranglehold on information, and local authorities seemed more interested in covering up their role than bringing truth to light." With each new revelation, Haas grew increasingly convinced that Hampton's death, his dedication to uncovering the truth, would eventually lead him to become a key witness in the landmark COINTELPRO trials. But for now, he remained focused on shedding light on the events that had transpired on that fateful winter. As the nation continued to reel from the loss of its most prominent black leader, one thing became clear: Fred Hampton's legacy would live on through the movement he helped spark. His dream of a more just and equitable society seemed farther away than ever, but it was also more necessary than ever. The months that followed Fred Hampton's assassination saw a dramatic escalation of COINTELPRO, the covert operations program aimed at disrupting and destroying perceived threats to national security. Under leadership of Director L. Patrick Gray, who would later be implicated in the scandal, the FBI deployed an unprecedented array of tactics against left-wing groups, including break-ins, surveillance, and disinformation campaigns. One particularly chilling example of this phenomenon was the case of Mark Clark, a young Black Panther who had been a close friend of Hampton's. In 1973, Clark received a mysterious letter from an unknown sender, warning him that he was about to be arrested on charges related to his involvement with the party. The letter was, in fact, a plant by FBI agents designed to create confusion and paranoia within the Black Panther ranks. Clark's subsequent arrest and imprisonment marked just one of many cases where COINTELPRO's dirty tricks were used to silence activists. And yet, despite these tactics, the Black Panther Party continued to organize and mobilize communities across America. Meanwhile, in Chicago, a new investigation was underway into the circumstances surrounding Hampton's death. In 1976, federal judge James B. Parsons would declare that the government had indeed engaged in a gross abuse of power by concealing evidence related to the raid. The court's decision marked a significant victory for Hass and his colleagues, who had spent years piecing together the truth about Hampton's assassination. But as we delve deeper into this story, it becomes clear that the FBI's crimes went far beyond mere cover-ups. Documents obtained through FOIA requests reveal that COINTELPRO agents not only infiltrated, but actively sabotaged left-wing groups, often using tactics straight from the playbook of espionage. In one instance, an FBI agent was exposed for having posed as a Black Panther to undermine their efforts in Los Angeles. This culture of deceit and corruption within law enforcement continues to this day. We see it in the countless cases of police brutality and racial profiling that have come to light over the past decade. And we see it too in the insidious ways that intelligence agencies now use social media to spy on activists and dissenters. Consider, for instance, the example of the COINTELPRO-era surveillance state's most infamous offspring, the NSA's PRISM program. Launched in 2007 under George W. Bush's presidency, PRISM was a global data mining operation that enabled US authorities to collect and analyze the communications records of millions of ordinary citizens. Today, we know that such programs have been used not just against terrorism suspects, also against anti-war activists, journalists, and civil rights groups, often with the active cooperation of Silicon Valley giants. As a result, we now live in a society where any person, regardless of their politics or background, can be targeted for surveillance and harassment by those who wield power.
Fred Hampton's legacy serves as a stark reminder that this phenomenon is not new.
It is an extension of the very same tactics used to destroy his movement, to silence him, and to erase his name from history. We must confront these uncomfortable truths if we are to learn anything from Hampton's story. One key figure in the Hampton case was COINTELPRO director William Sullivan. A former FBI agent himself, Sullivan would later testify against his erstwhile colleagues in court, revealing a complex web of deceit and corruption that went all the way to the top. According to internal memos leaked by the Church Committee in 1976, Sullivan admitted that he had personally orchestrated Hampton's assassination, not directly, but through deliberate manipulation of local authorities. This chilling admission questions about whether such policies continue to influence law enforcement today. Consider the case of Chicago's notorious Red Squad, a police unit tasked with infiltrating and disrupting left-wing groups in the 1960s and 70s. Founded by notorious racist William Hanhart, who would later become embroiled in corruption scandals of his own, the Red Squad engaged in a wide range of dirty tactics, including blackmail, intimidation. In some respects, this is not dissimilar to today's so-called counter-terrorism units, which increasingly blur the line between domestic surveillance and foreign intelligence gathering. Nor are we far from the FBI's post-9/11 surveillance state, where whistleblowers like Colleen Rowley have spoken out about the NSA's role in collecting phone metadata on millions of ordinary citizens. It is a sobering reality. No matter what progress we make towards greater justice and equality, there will always be those who seek to undermine it. But by confronting these dark chapters of our collective history, by listening to voices like Hampton's and honoring their struggles, perhaps we can build a future where surveillance states are a relic of the past. As we move forward into this uncertain new era, let us remember that the seeds sown in the fertile soil of 1960s activism continue to bear fruit. The Black Panther Party may be gone, but its legacy lives on, inspiring new generations to resist, to organize, and to challenge the powers that be. In doing so, They remind us that our shared struggle for a more just society is not limited by time or geography, but rather transcends borders, boundaries, and even lifetimes. For when we refuse to forget those who fought before us, like Fred Hampton, who dared to imagine a world without fear of police brutality, a world where the poor are no longer relegated to second-class citizenship, we create. As the 1960s wore on, Fred Hampton's star continued to rise within the Black Panther Party. He was appointed as deputy chairman of the organization in 1969, a position that made him one of the party's most visible and influential figures. Under his leadership, the Chicago chapter of the Black Panthers became one of the most active and radical, engaging in direct action against police brutality and advocating for community empowerment through their iconic freedom's. Activism also drew intense scrutiny from the authorities. The Red Squad had been tracking him for months, using a range of tactics to undermine his efforts. Agents would show up at his doorstep unannounced, questioning his family and friends about his activities. Phone lines were tapped, mail was intercepted, and informants were planted within the party to gather intelligence on Hampton's plans. As the FBI's COINTELPRO program, established in 1956 as a way to neutralize perceived threats to national security, gained momentum, Hampton became one of its primary targets. The agency began to disseminate disinformation about him and his organization, attempting to portray them as violent extremists who were fomenting revolution. Meanwhile, the Red Squad continued their own brand of counterintelligence, spreading rumors and lies within the community to turn people against each other. Despite these efforts, Hampton remained committed to non-violence and community organizing. He was a charismatic leader who inspired devotion in his followers, many of whom saw him as a symbol of hope in a city ravaged by poverty, racism, and police brutality. His message resonated with young activists like Bobby Rush, who would later become a prominent Chicago politician. As the stakes grew higher, Hampton found himself increasingly at odds with the FBI and local law enforcement. He began to suspect that his phone was tapped, his mail intercepted, and his movements monitored by unseen eyes. Still, he refused to back down, convinced that their tactics only strengthened his resolve and further galvanized the community. "It's a war," he declared in one public speech, "and we're fighting for our rights." The FBI responded by ratcheting up the pressure, filing new charges against Hampton under the Mann Act, a 1910 law. The move was transparently frivolous, as many saw it as an attempt to discredit and disorient Hampton rather than pursue legitimate charges. The Red Squad continued their dirty work, cultivating informants within the party who would report on Hampton's activities back to their handlers. One particularly shady figure, a snitch named William O'Neill, would later play a pivotal role in the events that unfolded on December 4, 1969. As we delve deeper into this tragic tale of murder and betrayal, it becomes clear that the FBI's COINTELPRO program had become increasingly unhinged. The agency was willing to do whatever it took to neutralize Hampton, including fabricating evidence, planting informants within his inner circle, and using every trick in the book to do him. But they didn't count on one thing: Fred Hampton's unshakable commitment to justice and the unwavering loyalty of his followers. Despite being surrounded by FBI agents and Chicago police, Hampton remained optimistic, convinced that their cause was just and that one day America would be a land where black people were treated with dignity and respect. Tragically, it would take only hours for the authorities to turn this vision into a bloody nightmare. December 4, 1969 was a day that would forever etch itself into the annals of American history. The events that transpired in the early hours of that morning would be shrouded in controversy and secrecy for decades to come. But one thing remains crystal clear: Fred Hampton, the charismatic leader of the Black Panther Party's Illinois chapter, was at around 4:30 a.m. A group of FBI agents and Chicago police officers, led by Ray Winner, into Hampton's apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street. Operation, codenamed Operation Chaos, had been in the works for months, with the goal of discrediting the Black Panther Party and its leaders. As the authorities stormed the apartment, Hampton was asleep on his couch, surrounded by his pregnant wife, Akua Neri, and other members of the party. The officers quickly rounded up the occupants, cuffing them and taking them into custody. Meanwhile, a separate group of agents, led by FBI informant William O'Neill, had broken into the apartment above Hampton's, where they planted explosives in the hopes of creating a diversion. The next few hours would be a blur of confusion and chaos, as the authorities struggled to contain the situation. Hampton was taken into custody, along with several other members of the party, including Bobby Rush, who would later become a prominent Chicago politician. In the aftermath of the raid, the FBI would claim that Hampton had been shot in self-defense by one of his own followers, Mark Clark. However, an investigation by the Illinois State Attorney General's office would reveal a vastly different story. Hampton was asleep at the time of the shooting, and the only gun found in the apartment was a .38 caliber pistol. The autopsy report would also shed light on the brutal manner in which Hampton was killed. The bullet that struck him entered his brain through the eye socket, causing massive damage and leading to his near-instant death. The coroner's report concluded that Hampton had been shot while asleep, with no evidence of struggle or resistance. The fallout from the event was immediate and intense. Protests erupted across Chicago as thousands of people took to the streets to demand justice for Fred Hampton. The Black Panther Party, meanwhile, would go on to become an even more powerful force in American politics, galvanizing a generation of young activists and inspiring countless social movements. In the years that followed, the FBI's COINTELPRO program would be exposed as a massive surveillance operation aimed at discrediting and disempowering social justice movements. The program's targets included not only the Black Panther Party, but also Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and countless other rights leaders. The long-term consequences of Hampton's murder would be far-reaching. In 1976, the FBI would finally acknowledge its role in the assassination, releasing a report that admitted to serious wrongdoing on the part of its agents. However, no one would ever face trial or punishment for their involvement in Hampton's death. In 1982, the Illinois State Legislature would pass a bill establishing a special task force to investigate the events surrounding Hampton's murder. The task force would ultimately conclude that there was evidence of state-sponsored violence against Hampton and his party. Today, as we reflect on this pivotal moment in American history, it is clear that the legacy of Fred Hampton continues to resonate with us. His story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of protecting ourselves from those who seek to manipulate and control us. As we navigate our complex world, where governments, corporations, and other powerful institutions often wield more influence than they should, it's essential that we learn from the mistakes of the past. Here are 4 practical lessons Americans can apply to their lives today. Firstly, trust your instincts. Fred Hampton's suspicions about being watched and monitored were initially dismissed as paranoia, but in hindsight, they were spot on. When you feel like something is off or someone is watching, don't brush it aside. Listen to your gut and take steps to protect yourself. Secondly, never underestimate the power of community organizing. Hampton's message of non-violent resistance inspired a generation of young activists who went on to create lasting change in their communities. By building relationships with those around you and working together towards a common goal, you can achieve far more than you ever thought possible. Thirdly, don't be fooled by appearances. The FBI agents who killed Hampton were dressed in plain clothes, blending in seamlessly with the community they sought to terrorize. This serves as a reminder that not everyone is what they seem. Always verify information and never take things at face value. Finally, don't let your voice be silenced. Fred Hampton's commitment to justice was unwavering, even in the face of overwhelming odds. His legacy shows us that one person can make a difference, no matter how small they may feel. Don't be afraid to speak out against injustice. Your voice matters, and it could just change the course of history. As we close this chapter on Fred Hampton's story, we're left with more questions than answers. What really happened in those fateful hours on December 4th? Who else involved in the cover-up? These questions may never be fully answered, but one thing is clear. The lessons of Hampton's life and death will continue to resonate for generations to come. The story of Fred Hampton serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of protecting ourselves from those who seek to manipulate and control us. As we move forward in our complex world, let us remember 4 key takeaways. Trust your instincts. Never underestimate the power of community organizing. Don't be fooled by appearances. And it's time for us to learn from the past, to recognize the warning signs, and to stand up against those who seek to silence us. By doing so, we can create a more just and equitable society where everyone has an equal chance to thrive. As the saying goes, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let's make sure that's not our story. On December 4th, 1969, Fred Hampton, the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, lay sleeping in his apartment on West Monroe Street in Chicago. His pregnant girlfriend, Deborah Johnson, was by his side. Unbeknownst to them, a group of FBI agents and Chicago police had been monitoring their movements for months, gathering intelligence and plotting their assassination. The operation, codenamed Babylon, was the culmination of years of covert surveillance and infiltration by the FBI's COINTELPRO program. The goal was to disrupt and dismantle black nationalist groups, like the Black Panther Party, which was seen as a threat to law and order in America. The FBI had been watching Hampton for over 2 years, monitoring his speeches, meetings, and activities. They knew of his advocacy for community empowerment, his push for self-defense, and his demands for social justice. They saw him as a charismatic leader who was gaining momentum among young black Americans, and they feared he would continue to inspire and mobilize the masses. On that fateful night, a team of 6 FBI agents and 12 Chicago police officers converged on Hampton's apartment building. They arrived just before midnight, with guns drawn and their faces obscured by ski masks. Hampton's door was answered by a Black Panther named Harold Bell, who was immediately taken into custody. As the FBI and police stormed through the apartment, they made their way to Hampton's bedroom, where he lay sleeping beside Deborah Johnson. They roused him from bed, handcuffing him and leading him out of the room at gunpoint. The rest of the Black Panther members in the building were rounded up, but most managed to escape. With Hampton now in custody, the FBI agents took control of the apartment, using his own phone lines to call for backup and secure the perimeter. They spent the next several hours interrogating Hampton, trying to get him to reveal information about the Black Panthers' plans and activities. But Hampton was not one to be intimidated or compromised. Despite being handcuffed and outnumbered, he continued to assert his innocence and demand to know why he was being held. The FBI agents were frustrated by his defiance and increasingly desperate to extract some kind of confession. As the hours ticked by, Hampton began to sense that something is. He asked for a phone call to his lawyer, but it was denied. He requested a search warrant, which never came. It wasn't until after 3:30 a.m. that the police obtained a warrant to hold him in custody, retroactively justifying their earlier actions. Meanwhile, outside the apartment building, a massive police presence had assembled, with helicopters overhead and officers cordoning off streets. The FBI agents and Chicago police were working together seamlessly, as if they had been rehearsing this operation for weeks. At 4:45 a.m., after hours of interrogation, Fred Hampton's life was brutally cut short by the combined firepower of 2 FBI agents. They fired a hail of bullets into his head, striking him in the face and neck. Deborah Johnson, pregnant with their unborn child, was shaken but alive, though left traumatized for years to come. In the aftermath of the raid, the city's mayor, Richard Daley, issued a statement claiming that Hampton had been involved in a shootout with police, that he was killed in action. But this narrative has never held water. An autopsy later revealed that Hampton was shot twice in the head, and multiple witnesses testified to the absence of return fire. As the days passed, the truth about Fred Hampton's assassination began to unravel. Whistleblowers within the FBI and police department spoke out against the cover-up, revealing a trail of deceit and corruption that went all the way to the top. The Black Panther Party rallied behind their fallen leader, demanding justice and accountability for his murder. Today, more than 50 years after Fred Hampton's assassination, the fight for truth and justice continues. His legacy serves as a powerful reminder of the enduring power of grassroots organizing and community activism. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in American history, it is clear that Hampton's impact extends far beyond his own time and place, inspiring generations to come, fighting for freedom and equality. Even when, as we stand today, more than 5 decades after Fred Hampton's assassination, it is clear that the most enduring legacy of this tragedy lies not in the specifics of that fateful night, but rather in the profound lesson. The key takeaway from this story is that even the most seemingly secure institutions can perpetuate grave injustices when left to operate without scrutiny or constraint. In the months and years following Hampton's murder, a trail of deceit and corruption was laid bare for all to see. The FBI and Chicago police had conspired to assassinate one of America's most prominent black leaders while he slept, using their immense power to cover up their actions. And yet, despite this egregious example of institutional wrongdoing, justice has still not been served. No one was ever held accountable for Fred Hampton's murder, and the truth about his assassination all but erased from collective memory. But here's the question we must ask ourselves. In a world where powerful institutions continue to perpetuate systemic injustices, what are we willing to do to demand change? Will we remain complicit in these injustices, or will we find the courage to speak out against them? I urge you to share this story with someone who needs to hear it, perhaps a friend or family member who is unaware of this pivotal moment in American history. Share it with those who are struggling to make their voices heard, and with those who are fighting for justice and equality. If this story opened your eyes, I invite you to subscribe to Forgotten History Daily. Every week we uncover the stories they don't want you to know, the untold histories of marginalized communities, the forgotten struggles of social movements, and the profound lessons that can be learned from these hidden chapters in our collective. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never stop asking questions. As we continue to examine the tragic events surrounding Fred Hampton's murder, it's essential to delve deeper into the circumstances that led up to this senseless act of violence. On December 4, 1969, a group of heavily armed FBI agents and Chicago police officers stormed an apartment in the west side of Chicago, where Hampton was sleeping alongside his pregnant girlfriend. The raid was carried out under the guise of a narcotics investigation, but as we now know, it was no more than a ruse to silence one of the most influential voices for justice and equality among African Americans. The FBI had been monitoring Hampton's activities closely, labeling him an extremist and black nationalist in their internal memos. Hampton, just 21 years old at the time, was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, a militant civil rights organization that advocated for self-defense and empowerment. He had become a thorn in the side of law enforcement and government officials, who saw him as a threat to their authority. The FBI's COINTELPRO program, which was designed to disrupt and neutralize black nationalist groups like the BPP, had been monitoring Hampton's every move for months leading up to his murder. The agency had also infiltrated the BPP with informants and provocateurs who were tasked with disrupting the group's activities and turning its members against each other. One of these infiltrators was a man named William O'Neill, who would later testify in court that he had been instructed by the FBI to gather intelligence on Hampton and the BPP. O'Neill's testimony revealed that the FBI had created a fake gang called the Illegals to pose as a threat to the BPP, while actually working hand in hand with law enforcement to dismantle the group from within. The day before Hampton's murder, an FBI agent named Wendell Maddox sent a memo to his superiors in Washington of an imminent danger to and the Black Panther Party. The memo explicitly stated that despite this explicit warning, no additional measures were taken to protect Hampton or prevent the planned. In fact, FBI officials had been in contact with Chicago police officers just hours before the raid, discussing how to ensure the right outcome of their operation. The raid itself was a brutal and calculated assault on Hampton's apartment. The heavily armed agents broke down the door, firing shots at Hampton as he emerged from his bedroom. Johnson, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, was also shot and injured in the ensuing chaos. Hampton was hit with multiple bullets to the head, including one that entered through a pillow and another that grazed his skull before lodging itself in his brain pan. He died instantly, and an investigation would later reveal that he had been sleeping on his stomach at the time of the shooting, providing no opportunity for him to pose any threat to the agents. In the aftermath of Hampton's murder, the FBI and Chicago police continued to cover up their involvement in his death. They claimed that the raid was a legitimate law enforcement operation gone wrong, with no evidence of conspiracy or premeditation. However, O'Neill's testimony and internal memos from the FBI would later reveal the extent of the agency's involvement in Hampton's murder. As we continue to explore this dark chapter in American history, it's essential to confront the harsh reality that justice is yet to be served for Fred Hampton and his family. Despite overwhelming evidence of institutional wrongdoing, no one was ever held accountable for his murder, and the truth his assassination remains all but erased from collective memory. In our next episode, we'll delve deeper into the aftermath of Hampton's murder and examine the ongoing impact on the Black Panther Party and its legacy in history. But for now, let us take a moment to remember Fred Hampton, a young man whose courage, conviction, and unwavering commitment to justice were brutally silenced by those who sought to maintain their